Hi there. How's it going? It's me again. I saw this sort of thread going around of sort of responses to Samwise 7's 13 RPG questions, and I thought I'd take a crack at it. Um if you've already seen this floating around, then I don't need to explain it, but apparently he needed this for a research paper and that he's doing, and all right, I'll play along. I'll play your silly games. Play your silly game. All right. First question: can you please describe in detail any negative situations that came about in your life because you played RPGs? For example, were you ever bullied, belittled, made fun of, told you were going to hell because you play those games, etc.? Those games. Alright. So, yes. I grew up in the South. I was gaming during the heart of the, anti-D&D craze that was going around. And, Tennessee is the Bible belt, Tennessee is the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. And, I actually did hear that one fairly often. I have at least one friend who, his mom was convinced I was just a bad influence on him, that I was evil, and largely because I was a gamer. So, there's that. But, it hasn't happened in a number of years. I don't get that on a regular basis now. What skills do you think you have personally improved upon by playing RPGs? Well, social interaction, I suspect, is probably the one that has best improved. Gaming is an inherently social activity. Any kind of gaming, tabletop, board games as well. But role-playing games force you to be in a situation where you have to describe things, talk about things, tell people what you're doing, tell people, if you're running a game, tell people what they see, what's around them, describe the world. This is a lot of social interaction. And then you add in characterization, which is partly tied to my brief stint in acting, but it certainly was enhanced by my role-playing activities, as well as my LARPing, which is sort of role-playing as well, but much more so in some regards. So I end up learning to be someone else. Yes, and I can talk like this all the time. But yes. Projecting myself into alternate personalities, alternate thought streams. I think those are all skills that I learned primarily because of role-playing games. Who introduced you to RPGs, and what was your first experience like playing them? So, there's the people who introduced me, and then there are the people I played with. My mom played D&D before I did. She and a bunch of her college buddies played. And I have long said, and it's true, she bought me my first D&D set because she was tired of me getting into hers. That said, I never played with her. I ended up playing with kids from school, and there was, at the height of the D&D sort of anti-D&D rage, just before that, there were a number of shrinks going around saying, this is a great thing. And so there were a number of school-sponsored clubs at the time. And I was at a summer school thing, and I did the sponsored club D&D. And that was the first session I can remember playing. I think I played with some friends before that, but that's the one that sticks out in my head. And that it was an interesting experience because it took me out of my comfort zone in some regards because I tend to be a very private person. And so and I always have been. But here was this thing where I was, joking about what my character was doing and talking to people, and it was very cathartic in that regard. Let's see, what was your first experience like running a game? Confusing. I have a confession to make. I suck at rules sometimes. Like, I know what I want to happen, and I hope that I can make it happen with the game that's being run, but I suck at rules. So it was a lot of me just sort of making stuff up as I went. And, somebody would be like, well, that's not what the rule book says. Okay, we'll go with what the rule book says. But I had read enough of the rules to sort of have a rough idea of how things were supposed to work. And the rest of the time I was just sort of winging it. It felt much more like storytelling and less like following a rule book. And that honestly has been a common trend in my gaming career. This is why I tend to like rules light games, or games where all of the rules are, well, not all of, but a good portion of the rules are front loaded. It's all interacting with how you make the character and less about the actual running of the game. D&D is a good example of that. The system itself is super simple. It's just you have the complexity added at character creation. Let's see. What was it like designing your own system? Over the years, I have designed my own systems, but I never quite finished them, right? I was like, oh, I'll put this idea here and this idea here, and I just never get around to finishing it. Now, it's a different thing in the professional capacity, because I did work on a computer-based RPG as a QA lead, and that's a different sort of experience. It was, 40 to 6 hour weeks were the common, not the uncommon option. There was a lot of spreadsheets and trying to make things work on a detailed level, but that's a different kettle of fish from tabletop role-playing games. My tabletop role-playing game systems usually only saw one use, if at that. Most of the times it was just stuff that was in my head. Just like, I have this idea and I'll toss it around and just never do anything with it. I'm bad about that, I'm afraid. What was it like making your own setting? So, making your own setting was actually fairly common in early D&D, in that you get an adventure and then be like, okay, I'll do this, but I'll add this bit here, and I'll grab some Tolkien here, and I'll grab this other thing here. And early on, it was all about grabbing those things and tossing them together. I later learned about major actually published settings like Mystara, which was then usually known as the Gnome World, the Gazetteers, and Forgotten Realms, and went on and played some other games, and then I came back to creating my own systems or my own settings in a much more systematized way. So it's a thing I approached much more seriously, and when I was making my own settings in that way, it would start with a premise, like what would and this is before I actually read the Hollow World setting for Mystara. Never interacted with it back in the day, but I came up with my own sort of Hollow World idea. And in my Hollow World idea, I was calling it Hallow. The idea was that, here was this internal city internal to a world, and it would be the major theme would be mystery. Like a lot of the player characters would be trying to figure out where the hell did this thing come from. And then I said, okay, that's part of it. And I started grabbing other ideas I wanted to toss in there. So I was like, and it's populated by peoples from various worlds. And I'll start with a bunch of Spartans. So it was basically a Greek city-state civilization army disappeared during one of the wars, one of the Peloponnesian Wars, and ended up in this place. And they decided, okay, we'll found an empire here. And so they have their own country. And then there are other groups that form their own nations from various different worlds on the surface of this world that nobody knows where it came from. And I thought that was a neat idea, and I wanted to play with that. I didn't run too many games with it, but the experience of making the world was fun. I got to do a lot with that. I've also worked with some LARPs and helping flesh out those settings with other people, which is challenging because you have your vision of the way things should be, and other people have their vision of the way things should be, and there is a new thing that's made from the interaction between the two or three or five ideas sort of meshing and running into each other. And maybe sometimes it's satisfying and better than what you thought, and sometimes it's less satisfying and not as cool as you wanted it to be. And you have to deal with that interaction in making the setting. So making a setting with other people has strong advantages and strong disadvantages. And it's I recommend people try it. And I will do it again in the future. I think I will definitely be making collaborative settings with people at some point or another again. But it should be entered in with a sort of eyes open, this is not without its challenges. Why do you think tabletop RPGs are not known by a good many people in the public? I disagree with the base premise of that question. If I say I play D&D, your average guy is going to know who I'm talking about. The people I work with, when I say I play D&D, they know what I mean. If I say I play Fate, they don't. So the real question is, why is it not as well known what RPGs are, and why is it not known the wide variety of them? Because if you say I play D&D, people are like, oh, okay, that's that thing that I heard about once. They probably don't know what it means. They don't know what actually happens. And most of the time when I've talked to people about it, they don't. I have to explain what it's like. And when I explain what it's like, almost universally the response is, oh, that sounds cool. As if in the back of their mind they were like, why did I think that was not cool? So it's a thing that worth asking, but I think the question needs to be reframed. The reason why is partly due to the fact that there's not a lot of good popular culture images of what it is. D&D was in E.T., but people didn't know what was going on there. Vin Diesel plays D&D. He says so in interviews. But when's the last time you saw somebody in in a movie playing D&D? Or any other game, for that matter? Very few times. One notable one comes to mind where it was sort of a slam on Dungeons & Dragons, the Tunnels and Trolls film that Tom Hanks did when he was very young. D&D, doesn't D&D and the various other games out there, people don't know what they are because they've never gotten a chance to see them. The D&D movie had nothing to do with what D&D is like. It was about a fantasy world. It was a fantasy film about a fantasy world. I saw a quote from Shia LaBeouf where he was like, I want to make a game about a bunch of people sitting around and playing D&D. Gamers is the Gamers series does that very well, but it's not exactly what you would call a super well-known film. Most people just don't get to see what it's like in popular culture, so they don't know what it's like. They don't know what it is. They don't know about the diversity of the field because they just never get to see it. It's not like video games. Video games, people get to see people playing video games in movies and on TV all the time. It comes up often. Role-playing games, once in a while, once in a blue moon, usually not in anything major, or if it is major, nobody explains what's happening. Like E.T. never explained it, what was going on. It was going on. They were playing D&D at the table. They just never explained it. That's my thought on that. Number 8. These are numbered. What is an RPG and why are these types of games fun? Well, role-playing games are about playing roles. They are about entering into a particular role. Sometimes that role is very loose. Like, I'm just a fighter. I hit things with my stick. And sometimes that role is much more elaborate, with deep backstories and, underlying interweaved interconnections between the various players and their characters. But ultimately it falls into playing a role. And we play roles every day, but we do it because we're enforced to play those roles. Some people play the role of father or mother. Some people play the role of police officer or criminal. Some people play the role of, clerk or scientist or doctor. But it's almost always something where the circumstances of their lives make them have to carry that role during the day. When you're playing a role-playing game, you're playing a role you chose to play. It is a role outside your normal experience as a general rule. And that is appealing because it puts control of a life in your hands. If only for a few hours. That's my thought on it. If you were going to teach a new player how to play RPGs, how would you go about doing that? That's tricky, honestly. Because I'm not in a position where I have to do that. I haven't had to teach somebody to play a game in a long, long time. My initial thought would be give them the rules, show them an example, and a good one. One that's not confusing, but actually is sort of compelling entertainment in and of itself. A good example was the Titan's Grave thing on Geek and Sundry, where it's entertaining in and of itself just to watch it, even if you're not really a gamer. And just go, all right, here's some rules, here's what it looks like to play, enjoy the show, and then when you're done watching the show and you've read come back to me and we'll set something up, and you'll have those expectations in place. That would be my guess, is just show them an example of what it's like that is compelling and entertaining in and of itself to people who are not already gamers, and provide them with the tools, and then here's the big thing. I learned a lot by sort of flailing in the dark myself. You kind of have to give people room to do that. Let them make mistakes. Let them mess up the rules. Let them do whatever they need to do to make the game fun. And then later they can correct. But the first few sessions, let them screw up. Let them sort of make it up as they go. Because they have to be invested in it before you need to start correcting them. That's my thoughts on it. What age group do you think plays these games more than other age groups? I think right now the sweet spot appears to be mid-20s to mid-40s. I don't see a lot of younger players these days. A few, mainly kids raised by people who are already gamers. But I tried to convince my niece and nephew to play, and they're aware of it. And they think it's mildly cool, but they grew up playing really detailed and in-depth video games. So trying to convince them that turn off the computer and come play this game with other people is a little harder sell than it was when I started, where video games were sort of these rough things at best and really couldn't convey things like really cool stories, really cool characters that well. So I'm guessing that between the 20s, early 20s to 25, you pick it up in college, and you keep playing. And some of us picked it up well before college and just kept playing, but you get the idea. I'm in my mid-40s at this point, and I've been playing it since I was 9. But I am, there are a lot of the old schools like myself, and then there are the younger people who came into it usually through some sort of social experience that was outside the normal sort of video game realm. So at college or something like that. That would be my guess as to the age. I don't know, but that would be my guess. Number 11. We still have numbers. What overall benefits do you think a person that plays RPGs has that perhaps non-gamers wouldn't have or would have less of? They're used to looking at the world in a systemized way, looking at rules, looking at the way the world works in that regard. Also, like I said before, they're used to occupying a role that they decide on themselves. So that's a big thing that a lot of people don't know of, and that gives, if you've done it for a while, and I've often heard it said by my LARPing buddies, LARP as the character you want to be when you're, going to an interview. Investing yourself with the aspects of the characters that you want to be sometimes helps you in day-to-day life. Just going to put that out there. Number 12. Have you ever seen an RPG session break out in any violence, or have you seen with your own eyes people becoming more violent after playing RPGs? Tricky. I did see a LARP once where somebody got angry because the LARP had some pre-written characters and there was a pre-written relationship, and one of the people in the relationship had a relationship outside of the game, and there was some jealousy and there was some anger, and I got involved, and it was not pretty. I've certainly seen more of that actually at LARPs, which is weird because LARPs is generally a fairly welcoming community, but it also involves a lot more physical activity, and getting hit in the face can make you angry. Just gonna say that. At the table, role-playing games, I'm trying to think. I've seen people get angry, but I've never seen anyone get violent. I know it happens just because human beings are like that, but I've never seen it. Do you think RPGs are still seen as much of a negative thing as they once were? No. No. None of the old, D&D is of the devil and you'll all go to hell bets are really as prominent as they were. It is no longer a thing that you deride people for being nerds. I'm sure there's some schmuck somewhere who derides people for being nerds, but honestly, I think it's become pretty clear that the world is ruled by nerds, and everybody knows it. Anyways, these are my answers to Samwise 7's questions. I'm going to post a link to his original video and the list of questions if you're interested in participating. And you should just go and post it on his channel. Hopefully these answered your questions, dude. I don't know. It was a good set of questions. It made me, think. So, kudos to you, sir. Kudos to you. To everyone else, subscribe, share, like, the usual stuff. Check out the Patreon if you can afford to. No pressure if you can't. I am not a big pressure guy. And I'm going to wrap this up because I think I've gone way longer than I intended to. So I'll talk to you later. Bye.